Hello, everybody. This is the Catholic Esquire. Today, I want to talk about the concept of time bombs in Vatican II. What are time bombs in Vatican II and why does it matter? Well, I'm going to show you with a very specific example today of what a time bomb in Vatican II looks like. But before I get there, let's ask ourselves, why should we even care about this? As you all know, in October coming up, the next few weeks, next few months, all we're going to hear at this wretched synod on synodality is implementing the council, Vatican II, the council. And unfortunately, within traditional movement right now, there's a lot of schizophrenia about how we should think about the Second Vatican Council. There's one group of prads that believe that we absolutely have to adhere to the Second Vatican Council, that everything in the Second Vatican Council is perfectly Catholic. Or if it's not implemented correctly, then that's not the problem of the council, that's the problem of whoever's not implementing it correctly. There's another group of Catholics, and I happen to fall into that category, that say, no, there's real problems with the Second Vatican Council. There's a lot of problems with Second Vatican Council, and we can talk all about its levels of authority and whether it's dogmatic or not dogmatic, or whether it's part of the ordinary magisterium or not, even though Pope Paul VI says it's not part of the extraordinary magisterium, but could be part of the ordinary magisterium. All this confusion and chaos, and we wonder why the church is where it is at today. Because, hey, guess what? Big problem. If you have an ecumenical council and no one understands whether it is actually teaching the Catholic faith or not, whether it's dogmatic or what level of authority it is, it's probably problem number one with the council, don't you think? But no one can even agree on this almost 60 years later? No, it's a problem. But that's my view. I'm going to show you an example of why it's a problem. And one of the problems with the Second Vatican Council is the notion of time bombs. Michael Davies wrote a whole chapter in his book on the Second Vatican Council about time bombs. I know the SSPX has published some materials about time bombs. And so, what I'm going to do is give you a very specific example. Now, a time bomb is what? It's a bomb. You sort of wind up, you leave it, you walk away. And after you walk away, once you're safely out of sight, it explodes. We see them in cartoons, right? We remember them from like Bugs Bunny cartoons or like Inspector Gadget, I think. You see it very common, kind of funny, haha, set the bomb, walk away, the thing blows up. Well, that's exactly what was going on at the Second Vatican Council with the modernists who infiltrated the council. They intentionally, with malice aforethought, put language into the documents that at the time they were put in appeared fairly innocuous, knowing full well that after the council was done and closed and everybody went home over the next few years, they could use that language that they intentionally inserted into the documents in order to make modernist changes within the church. The other nice, convenient thing about time bombs for the modernists is that they're not really easy to see. A time bomb is typically hidden. You don't put it out in the open and see it ticking. No, you hide it. And in this case, they did it multiple times in multiple documents. And they could have a document, say 99%, that's just seems Catholic or even reads Catholic. But then that little 1% in there, if you're not careful, they hang their hat on to make massive amounts of changes in the church, which of course many of the good bishops, the good Orthodox bishops at the council at that time did not see. Rightly or wrongly, that's the situation we found ourselves in because it was all a big political game. This has nothing to do with helping people in their faith or the church. This is all about politics and imposing the modernist liberal will upon the church after they infiltrate it from inside. Now, let's look at an example of a time bomb. When we look at this, and we're going to look at the example of the use of Latin in the liturgy. We're going to look at the document Sacrosanctum Concilium, which is an apostolic constitution of the highest authority, apparently, at the Second Vatican Council. And and it's going to talk about how we are supposed to use Latin in the liturgy. Keep in mind, of course, Latin was the norm in the Roman Catholic Rite up until the Second Vatican Council. And now today, you go to any Novus Ordo Mass, there's 99% of the time, there's simply no Latin at all. So how do you go in less than 100 years from having Latin at every single Mass to never having Latin at all? Well, it happens because of time bombs. But how did the good bishops allow this to get through? Let's take a look at the language, and you're going to see how this works. As we look at this, as we take a look at this sentence in Sacrosanctum Concilium about the use of Latin in the liturgy, keep in mind too, the way time bombs work is through the use of ambiguity. Ambiguity and, quite frankly, very bad legal drafting, which could be, but could be just negligence. I think it's probably intentional. So let's take a look at this example. Okay, we are now going to take a look at Sacrosanctum Concilium. I am on the Vatican's website. You can see this right here at the top of the screen. Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy, Sacrosanctum Concilium. This is the Vatican website, so it is the approved translation by the Vatican itself. And we're going to start at paragraph 36. And we're going to keep it limited to paragraph 36. There are some other mentions of Latin in this document, but this is the primary one where it talks about the general use of language in the liturgy. And at 36 has, notice here it has four subparagraphs, 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to look at subparagraphs in particular, 1, 2, and 3. Now, we start out with 36.1. Particular law remaining in force. The use of the Latin language is to be preserved in the Latin rites, period. Now that seems like a pretty good statement, doesn't it? And if you're a conservative bishop, you're going to look at that and say, oh, good, I agree with that. I'm really happy that's in there. Now, we go on to paragraph 2. It says, but since the use of the mother tongue, that's Latin, whether in the Mass, the administration of the sacraments, or other parts of the liturgy, frequently may be of great advantage to the people, the limits of its employment may be extended. This will apply in the first place to the readings and directives, and to some of the prayers and chants, according to the regulations on this matter to be laid down separately in subsequent chapters. Okay, it appears here that Latin can be extended to certain places in the liturgy. That's fine. It's a little confusing, the language here. The limits of its employment may be extended. I think that's a little confusing. But to some extent, this may just be a problem with translation. You have to understand these documents were written in Latin and these are the translations. So we'll give a little leeway there. Okay, so far, so good. Now we get to subparagraph 3 of paragraph 36. These norms being observed, it is for the competent territorial ecclesiastical authority mentioned in Article 22.2 to decide whether and to what extent the vernacular language is to be used. Their decrees are to be approved, that is, confirmed by the Apostolic See, and whenever it seems to be called for, this authority is to consult with bishops of neighboring regions which have the same language. All right. Now, let's take a look at this. Now, this is a Vatican II time bomb, and I'm going to show you why. Remember, we're talking about one paragraph here. We're talking about paragraph 36. These are subsections of paragraph 36. So presumably they're all interrelated, and they seem to be talking about the same topic. Now, read subparagraph 3 very carefully. These norms being observed. What norms? The norms in paragraph 1 and paragraph 2 is what they're talking about. These are the norms, the general rule, all right? It is for the competent territorial ecclesiastical authority mentioned in Article 22.2, I'll look at that in 1 second, to decide whether and to what extent the vernacular language is used. Now, wait a second here. I thought in paragraph 36.1, the use of the Latin language is to be preserved in the Latin rites. Now we have in subparagraph 3, it says this competent territorial ecclesiastical authority in Article 22.2 is to decide whether and to what extent the vernacular language is used. Okay, so to decide whether, that means whether the vernacular at all is going to be used, and then if it is, to what extent. So this ecclesiastical authority can decide to what extent the vernacular is going to be used. Well, what if they decide to extend it throughout the entire Mass? Well, it seems perfectly legitimate if you just read this. What's Article 22.2 refer to? Real briefly, let's scroll up and look. Article 22.2 says, in virtue of power conceded by law, the regulation of the liturgy within certain defined limits belongs also to various kinds of competent territorial bodies of bishops legitimately established. Okay, what are these territorial bodies? Well, today they're called the Conferences of Bishops in the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. It's a territorial body of bishops. Well, what just happened here? Paragraph 36.3 just said that this body of bishops can decide what language is to be used at the Mass and to what extent. And what's really interesting about this is in paragraph 36, it specifically refers to 22.2. Well, why not 22.1? Well, 22.1 says regulation of the sacred liturgy depends solely on the authority of the church. Oh, yeah, like, it always has been. That is, on the apostolic see, and the laws may determine on the bishop, not a conference of bishops. This, my friends, 22.1, has always been the situation in the church. 22.2 is a new modernist invention. Various kinds of territorial bodies of bishops. Okay, but in paragraph 36, it only refers to 22.2 and not 22.1. Let's go quickly back down to 36 and wrap this up. So you can see, my friends, what is going on here. You have modernism being injected into the Second Vatican Council. This isn't a time bomb, but it's done in a way that's somewhat disguised. All right? It's disguised because it provides a very Catholic statement in paragraph 36.1 that the Latin language is to be preserved. And it sets out some nice, fancy fluff language here that talks about how great Latin is. And then in subparagraph 36.3, they blow up the entire thing. And it says that, well, despite what we just said, none of that matters if, according to 22.2, because now we have to scroll back up and look at that, the territorial body of bishops decides otherwise. And so what we have is a situation, in the law, we call this the exception, eating up the rule. You create a general rule, and then you create an exception, basically invalidates the rule you just set out up here, which is what subparagraph 3 did to subparagraph 1. Now, if you are a conference of Catholic bishops and you really want to have the vernacular in your masses throughout the entire Mass and get rid of Latin entirely, you just simply say, well, we read paragraph 36.3 of the Apostolic Constitution, Sacrosanctum Concilium. It gives us authority to do that. We are exercising our authority. And my friends, voila, you have just destroyed the Latin language from the Mass. And you did it with a big smile on your face and with the approval of the Council Fathers at the Second Vatican Council, who almost certainly, a majority of them had no idea that's what was going to happen when they approved this paragraph 36. Now, I just showed you a very basic example of how a Vatican II time bomb works. It implements the use of ambiguity, internal conflict within the language itself, and it typically will refer you to different sections within the same document, very much like an IRS code, a legal document. And that's because that's what they intended to do with these Vatican II documents. The modernists I'm talking about intended to make these very much like legal codes, and much of them were results of political compromise. And so you will see internal inconsistencies within the documents themselves, and even within sentences or sections or paragraphs themselves, like we just saw with subsection 1 versus subsection 3. There's many other examples of these time bombs, and I will be glad to show you them to you over the course of future videos. But please keep this in mind as we hear more about the Second Vatican Council implementing the Second Vatican Council, especially during this wretched synod on synodality, where they're going to attempt to try to change the timeless teachings of the church. We all know they're going to try. They certainly want to. Everybody knows that. But this is what we're dealing with here. And so, for all those people that say, oh, we should just read the documents of the Second Vatican Council, like Bishop Barron always tells us to do, yeah, you should read them and read them really carefully, because a lot of it just simply doesn't make sense or is internally inconsistent, like I just showed you with respect to the use of Latin and the vernacular in the liturgy. I hope this is helpful. If you enjoy the video, please share it. Please like the video and like and subscribe to the channel. That helps a lot. It really does. And I appreciate you listening. Have a wonderful day. God bless.